Researchers have identified criticality emerging within brain organoids, yes, our lab-grown human brain friends. Now they are often used for research, and there's also a few data centers that have been set up using brain organoids, and they're thought to be a potential alternative to artificial intelligence. Now, this is a preprint, although that is not a reason to disbelieve it. There is also supporting evidence for this in the literature. Also, just because a lot of people do not know this if you're not publishing in science, preprints do not mean bad. It just means that they have not yet been fully peer-reviewed and published. If you're curious about a preprint, check out the journal in which it's being reviewed by, and also check out the lab and see if they are reputable. Criticality is the theoretical point between order and chaos, and it is thought to be necessary for consciousness. Consciousness as we know it, as being awake and aware. It's thought to be interfered with when you go under anesthesia. There is still a great deal that we do not understand about consciousness, and this is not to say that brain organoids are definitely conscious. It means that they share qualities that we have in our own brains, and that makes sense. They are lab-grown miniature versions of our brains, and they have demonstrated the capacity for learning and memory. You can train them using ordered or disordered signals, and some researchers have claimed sentience, which is still controversial, partially because we have no measure for sentience or consciousness at all. I mean, you could toss the mirror test at them. I mean, some of them have eyes. However, the mirror test is really not a measure of consciousness. I mean, it could be, but fish pass it. That might mean that fish are conscious, or that consciousness is just something we fundamentally do not understand and probably won't, because we are operating in philosophy when we can't really measure an outcome. So what is preventing us from making a brain that is comparable to a human brain, and would that be conscious? Well, we do already know that they have brain waves, largely delta, and those are associated with an unconscious state, although they do have other brain waves. They match the same brainwave patterns as a preterm baby, although they are significantly smaller, usually a few millimeters across. Although, some researchers are trying to make them bigger and more complex, because you can lob them together as an assembloid. Or you can grow them as generally larger, and many researchers are trying to do that to make the perfect model for a brain. And that is largely what is going on in the research side of things, where people do things like medical research and trying to understand the brain. And then there's the computation side, where things have largely gone two-dimensional to solve the size problem. Yeah, the bigger they get, the more likely they are to become hypoxic. And yes, you can give them a primitive version of a circulatory system by lobbing them together with other organoids. You can give them a little mini heart and a little mini circulatory system, if you would really like to. And you can also create little mini bodies, which I affectionately call homunculi. These can include a sensory system, like eyes and a spinal cord and physical sensation. When we talk about them in robots like Spiderbot, and there are others, for the most part they're translating stimuli, so what they're experiencing around them, into electrical impulses that have meaning, but they're not experiencing sensation in the same way that we do. In order to do that, they're going to need a spinal cord organoid, and it does get a little bit morbid, because the thought around building these little homunculi is that they can be twins for patients. So if you aren't sure how someone is going to respond to a treatment, well, you can grow them, a version of them, and physiologically it should respond as a patient will. Now, a question you might ask is, why robots? Why are these being combined with robots? If largely the divide is between using them as AI and using them for medical research, why is anyone embodying them? Well, yeah, there is another unhinged side of this equation, and I don't really know which it belongs to because many of the people involved in creating organoid robotics are also in medical research. I mean, Spiderbot was the first, and it is still near and dear to my heart, and Metabot seems to not be a thing. That paper came out a few years ago, and it was kind of just a vague idea for how to make a brain organoid robot. It never came to fruition. But there is real organoid robots out there. I think one of the interesting applications for these is honestly prosthetics. I mean, they can interface between electronics and, squishy biological stuff. You can borrow from nature, or rather steal from nature. You can grow organoids and use that as a sensory interface for a robot. It can communicate with carbon. Graphene is a great use of it. In this way, you can give a robot a sensory experience, even if we don't consider it an experience in the way that we do. Will that necessarily be brain organoids that are doing the interfacing, or skin or nerves? Maybe all of the above. I imagine that you could have nerve organoids that integrate with the electronics, and then that can integrate into the actual nervous system. And yeah, brain-computer interfaces are also another really good use of these guys. Your body is kind of irreplaceable, so if we can grow a version of your body that can connect with it and do minimal invasiveness, then that seems like a win for everyone. Now, I do want to reiterate that just because we may see some signs of brain activity that are similar to brain activity necessary for consciousness, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily having an experience, not in the way that we are, and we do have to think about scale. Although, some researchers at Johns Hopkins want to make them 1 centimeter, at least, with their new circulatory systems. Just to get an idea of what 1 centimeter means, that's the same as a mouse's brain, and they are capable of some pretty serious cognition. So I think we are at the point where we should be genuinely concerned about what this could end up being and what kind of undue suffering it might cause. How can we address this? Honestly, I have no idea. I think there's a whole lot of good that could come out of it, and yes, there are ethical concerns. I'm just glad that I'm not responsible for making these decisions. Either way, I will keep you up to date, and I hope you've enjoyed this. Follow for more.